I believe that many pagan faiths and traditions are far closer to truth and are better for society than both atheism and most Abrahamic faiths. And I'll explain why I think this and why you may want to consider paganism yourself. But first, what encouraged me to make this video is the fact that when I see the current landscape of spirituality, at least here in the West, it seems that what the mainstream pushes is either one of the many Abrahamic faiths or atheism. And this has always bothered me because the former is a very crude form of spirituality and the latter is a complete rejection of spirituality. I want to offer you all another option, though that is not only just as viable as atheism and Abrahamism, but even better. And by the end of this video, I know you will feel the same. I will now present to you 4 cases as to why I believe paganism is the superior form of spirituality. For my first case, and perhaps one of the most overlooked arguments to be made for paganism, is the fact that there is a considerable amount of scientific data that has been collected on things of spiritual matters that is far more in favor of a pagan worldview, as opposed to the Abrahamic and atheistic ones. You see, paganism, atheism, and Abrahamism lie on a foundation of beliefs that are assumed to be true, and these are called axioms. For pagans, our axioms would generally be things such as reincarnation, animism, polytheism, and unified consciousness. These are concepts that either directly go against the atheistic and Abrahamic worldviews, or, at the very least, brings them into question. But the catch here is that the pagan concepts can at least be backed by evidence. A college professor at the University of Virginia named Ian Stevenson spent over 40 plus years of his life researching the topic of reincarnation and its reality. He collected over 3,000 cases worldwide that proved to some degree that reincarnation was a real occurring phenomenon. In his research, he focused on children who claimed to remember past lives. He would set out to investigate the claims of these children, and he would not only find supporting evidence for their claims by looking through personal documents like birth certificates and talking to locals, but he also found in over 200 cases that there was biological evidence. You see, Ian Stevenson found that on some of these children who had reported dying from things such as stab wounds, shots, or blunt trauma had strange birthmarks, lesions, and other abnormalities on their skin where they were said to have been hit nearing their death, further testifying to the reality of reincarnation. Proof for the idea of animism has also been discovered. Deepika Chube, a psychologist who conducted a study where she and her colleagues would project and say negative feelings to one group of plants and positive things to another group. And she found that the plants met with positive affirmations had significantly better growth and germination than the ones given the negative affirmations. There was also a Japanese scientist by the name of Masaru Emoto who found that when different kinds of intentions are projected onto water, there is an observable difference in the crystallized formation based on the emotions projected onto the water, suggesting that even water can react to human emotions. Lastly, we also have evidence that even balls of plasma can be alive because they demonstrate behaviors that are very identical to multicellular life, such as self-organization, replication, and even communication. These are facts which blatantly contradict the Abrahamic faiths that assert that there is only heaven or hell after death, and the atheistic worldviews that assert that there is no soul or spiritual realm. Going into case 2, I want to focus on morals, traditions, and culture. Humans as a species are very susceptible to amnesia, and most Christians, Muslims, and atheists would rather have you believe that before their religions and beliefs came around, everyone was just a savage, sacrificing their neighbors, killing their kids, and just being pure degenerates who did not build much. But history kind of demonstrates the opposite. The greatest monuments and statues humans have built have actually been pagan in essence, and inspired by pagan belief systems. I'd even go so far to say that there has been an extreme drop in the greatness of our architecture and culture since most of the world has abandoned their pagan beliefs. There has been no Abrahamic or atheistic equivalent to the Great Pyramids of Giza. The Parthenon of Athens has been standing longer than most Abrahamic faiths have been in existence. I have yet to see a church that induced such a sense of tranquility as a Shinto temple has, and the Muslims owe their architecture to the pre-Islamic Persians. The question is now what have pagans built, but rather what have they not, and how much do we owe our current culture to them? Morality was also never a problem. There is the Ma'at in ancient Kemetic spirituality, which acts as a moral system, centering around justice and harmony among other things. In Buddhism, there is the Eightfold Path, which speaks of having good conduct on every level. In Hellenism, you have virtue and virtus. And finally, in Zoroastrianism, there is Asha, which is very similar to the Eightfold Path in Buddhism. All of these are ethical codes of conduct which far supersedes being instructed to hit your wife, stone your kids, or completely rely on a subjective foundation of morality. There is no shortage of practices, culture, and devotional ceremonies within paganism. But unlike with our contesters, paganism was flexible with what could be considered as worship and devotion, and this was one of its biggest strengths. And that leads me into case 3. You see, long ago our ancestors understood the spiritual aspect of the cosmos to a greater degree than we currently do today. They recognized that life and consciousness flowed through everything. They understood that everything in the cosmos extended from the same source of all creation and life. They understood that God was not just an individual entity, but rather an amalgam of parts of which we are also a part, and that we could revere the individual parts of God without having to acknowledge the overwhelming whole of God. Our ancestors recognized the transcendent abilities of the human mind and actively studied them. They understood the masculine and feminine principles of the cosmos and respected them. They understood that the spiritual realm was as nuanced and complicated as the physical realm, and above all else, our ancestors understood that we are souls, spiritual beings, that have lived and will live after death. They learned to embrace every aspect of God, whether it would have been in war, art, community, love, or worship, and they'd listened to the wisdom of their ancestors centuries after they had passed. They would be inspired by the divine order, and finally they would free. But now, instead of everything being a part of the community of life, there is a hierarchy, with some life being more alive than other life. God is no longer a complex divine entity, but is rather more like an individual human with superpowers. The psychic ability of the human mind has been crudely stripped down to being either demonic or imagination. We have divorced matter from spirit and questioned why we feel dead inside. And now even the life cycle of the human soul and its purpose has been reduced to a thing that either needs to be saved or is non-existent. This blatant inversion of true natural order was bound to pervert the very core of what our ancestors intended spirituality to be, and has also turned into something hollowed of its authenticity, sacredness, and beauty. We owe it to our ancestors to not let their wisdom fade into obscurity, and to not be blind by the lies and falsehoods of the modern age. We owe it to them to restore and continue their legacy, and we owe it to ourselves to reconnect with true natural order. My final case is not an argument, but rather a call to action. The world has had a spell cast onto it and has been in a deep trance for the past 2,000 years or so, and if we do not take a stand against the entities responsible for this, I fear that we may come to a point of no return. There has been an unforgivable amount of effort to erase what our ancestors knew and practiced before these modern beliefs arrived, and these efforts have been so far effective, but the war has not yet finished. It is for us to restore and rediscover what has been lost. We will not allow this crime against natural order to go unpunished, and we will not leave our ancestors without vindication. The blame for this spiritually confused world falls largely on the Abrahamic and atheistic doctrines, which have pushed ideas that are inherently contradictory to the natural order, and this has muddied the waters that were once holy and clear. To fight this, we will need to make a promise to ourselves and our ancestors that no matter what, we will not let their wisdom be diluted or lost. We will study their ways, build upon and practice their traditions, make great and inspiring art to the gods as they once did, engage with the consciousness of the earth, skim through the Akashic records, and encourage others to stand with us. And so there you all have it, a very basic rundown of why I consider paganism as the ultimate truth and why you may want to consider it yourself. Tell me your thoughts and opinions, especially if you disagree with me, and stay tuned for my next videos if you enjoyed this one. I am Metanot, and thank you for watching.